What up, folks? Told you that was going to be long and annoying. Welcome to the show, Kevin. I cannot wait to have this conversation. How you doing, brother?
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate it. Like, I can't tell you how many people I reach out to your level. I consider you a very tenured entrepreneur, smart dude. And the fact that you got back to me, but not only that you got back to me, you mentioned that I had a unique way of reaching out. That meant a lot to me, man, because and we're just already going to go off script. How true is the at least 100 no's, more like 500 no's to get one yes? How true has that been in your life?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, if you're not getting a lot of no's, you're definitely not asking the right questions, right? So I would say, there's definitely when the ratio is like 1 to 100 or 2 out of 100 or something like that, you're definitely pushing yourself, and I think that's it's going to take that kind of reps to see that kind of success.
So it evolves, right? Too, because you have a good point. In the beginning, when you have no one, it's just inevitable, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't get smarter, hence why my strategy shifted. And for everyone that doesn't know, what one of my, I think, I'm going to give away all my secret sauce. I don't care because no one's going to take the time to do it, right? This is another thing I need to ask you as a Silicon Valley guy. I make a custom intro video and describe in a video format to people what the benefits are as a founder to come on the show. The fact that people even take the time to make that video won't do that. This is the second question, follow-up off script to you. What are your thoughts on sharing your ideas? Because 99.9% of the people will never steal it because they just don't have it in them to act on it. What are your thoughts there? I think there's probably multiple layers, and this is a complex question, but you going through what you've gone through, I'd love your insights on that question.
Yeah, I think in the early days, definitely felt more secretive of like, oh, you have this idea, you don't want people to find out, and most people don't know, and most people don't care. And so I think as you get, kind of more experience, but also just more comfortable with the fact that like, even if you tell people exactly what to do and what you're going to do, they probably won't have your skill set or won't have your network or your ability to go execute on that, even if you gave them the exact answer, or they don't care. And so I think for the notion of like secrecy, and I mean, it's kind of funny because my current company's stealth today, like I don't list it on LinkedIn or what it is. But it's more for like, it actually reduces about a bunch of inbound, right? Because if you said, hey, I started a new company,
yes,
you already get hit up by a lot of investors, but it like the instant you name it and you announce it, then like it kind of goes to the next level.
Yeah.
But so we're working with customers, doing everything like, and we don't need anything right now from a publicity point of view. We have like plenty of, customers, plenty of like sort of, team. We've recruited the people we want. Like we have more people reaching out, saying, oh, it looks like you're working on a new project. And so the short answer is, yeah, like I think there's no reason to keep it secret. I see a lot of people, hey, I got this crazy NDA and I can't talk to you about this or that. And honestly, ideas are pretty cheap. It's execution that's expensive. And so I think that in the nutshell is the hook there, which is, it's like anything, creating content or being online, like most people won't do it. Right.
Yeah. So
it's okay.
Here's a follow-up question to that. Because you just said something. Does a crazy NDA turn you off immediately, or you feel like that's part of the process?
I mean, so my thing is I sign NDAs all the time, right? For different things, for both myself and we send out companies
NDAs as well, right?
If they make sense, right? And so it makes sense, meaning like they're mutual, like, hey, you don't share my stuff, I don't share yours. Like they kind of make sense. And it's of the point of a conversation where it's sort of one party needs it, right? I typically don't initiate NDAs. I'll be honest. Like it's been rare that I'm like, man, I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. And even if I'm like, if it's super, like, I'm not going to share that stuff. And so, yeah, my sense is the NDA is like, I call it the friend DA, which is like, hey man, we're friends. Like, we're not going to, like, I'm not going to say this or that. And I think that model works better where it's like, hey, we're sort of a trusted thing. I'm in a lot of like CEO groups and like even entrepreneur groups and even just friends in the Valley that you talk about things. Hey, you've learned this or that. And like, that's a private thing. But yeah, I've signed NDAs and then I respect them when I sign them. But I think like when I get an NDA that's like, you know, you can never share anything I've told you forever, and you have unlimited liability for anything I've told you, even if you already knew about it. And you're like, oh, like, and that's like, honestly, like, you know, ChatGPT can tell you that that's probably a bad idea to sign it. And then of course, if you have like a lawyer or any kind of, you know, corporate experience, like you're not going to do that. And I think the other case that I would see where NDAs get tricky is when the entities themselves are very different. So you have like a huge company with a very small startup. And like, as a small startup, you typically have to take more risk and sign NDAs or do contracts with like 100%. Bigger terms and liabilities, because the other side is, you know, they just have more money. They have more to protect. And so you're sort of taking that risk. And that risk as a small company is that, you know, if you make a mistake, you're going to go out of business if the mistake is that serious. Right. Which is unfortunate. But then as you sort of gain status, you can kind of go back to a more typical mutual. But short answer is I don't sort of initiate. I'm more of a friend DA guy. It's like, hey, man, I don't share stuff that I shouldn't be sharing. And, you know, I would expect that same sort of respect from others.
100%. And I also love the friend DA term. And then again, I think this is the context that we'll get a lot throughout this podcast, which I'm excited about, is you're tenured. So just for this NDA thing, like you said, there's actually multiple scenarios and examples depending on the stage that you are at a company, or even in life, or even just experiences. So I'm excited to see the multi-layer answers and things that we go through. So already went off script. I know this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I cannot wait. To break quickly, though, for all of the people watching already, I got hacked, people. I'm an idiot. I probably clicked on a link. I was going so fast. I got a lot of things going on. Listen, man, I got an 18-month-old. I'm trying to build 2 companies, and I have a full-time remote job as well. So all things are spinning. And I must have clicked on something and logged into my Twitter, think it was a legit site, game over, boom, 5 o'clock that night. My email's been changed. I've sent 20 plus messages to Twitter help. They have hundreds of millions of users. I get it. I think Mikey G is more important than Elon Musk, but whatever. That's my own opinion. But if anybody listens to this, please help me out and DM Midlife a DM if you think you can help me get Mikey G back, because it is very, very important to my business, and I would appreciate you all. That also being said, we got more guests this week. Tomorrow we have RecTech. Kirsch, he built Internet Game back in 2021. My favorite story about Kirsch is when I first saw his project, it was the 2121 hype. I thought, this guy is 100% a rug. There's no way this is a legit company. This guy, because he was doing the like, hey, I've made some games and we're going to give away Bored Apes and all of these different things. And I was like, this guy is such a scam artist. And so he actually ended up coming on my podcast. Amazing human being, has not stopped, has tried to white label his product. Now he's kind of reinvented and improved upon his product. And now he's got kind of an inside joke with the RecTech name. And he's actually minting today. 0.25 Solana. They're giving away a Pudgy Penguin. But again, it's this social interactive game via Web3. And the guy works hard and he's legit. So check them out. I'll DM them in the chat. And then we have Mr. Katz coming on Friday, who Mr. Katz, if you don't know who Mr. Katz is, he is the artist behind A Kid Called Beast. A lot of you have heard about such a project. He's an amazing 3D artist. He has helped a lot of prolific projects in Web3 on animation and character design in the background. You don't even know who he is, but we're gonna have an awesome conversation. He's just really good human being. I can't wait to have that conversation. So that's what's going on with Mikey G. But now the most important thing and why we're here, Kevin, the man, the myth, the legend. The rest of the time will be dedicated to you, and it's going to be a fascinating conversation. But what we always do here on the Mikey G Web3 podcast and the Midlife Crisis show when Maddie is on is we do a formal introduction. Kevin doesn't really need an introduction because most people in the space do know this man. But if you have never heard of Kevin, a couple tidbits. Deeply involved for 25 plus years in Silicon Valley area, building companies. He's sold some companies for very small chump change. I won't even talk about how small the chump change was. He's been in Web3 for the last handful of years and now is deeply ingrained in the AI space. I know we're going to talk about this. I actually had, Michael Lee from co-founder of Abstract. Have you met him yet?
Yeah.
Fascinating guy. He came on the show and we talked about these phases of technology.
This is hyped. I said my first time I've ever been on Abstract streaming. I was just tweeting the links. It's kind of cool.
You're live on Abstract, brother. It's the link is in the comment of the live stream on Twitter that you repost. But we were talking about, and I think we're going to talk about this, is the evolution of early 2000s. We had the .com, then the whole, we're in Web3 blockchain. AI is obviously a thing. And I can't wait to talk about these, once you're in it for as long as you've been in it, I'm sure you see patterns, right? And we were talking about the patterns and what the patterns are currently happening now and what we see about in the future. Can't wait to have that conversation. And then ultimately, he has a newsletter as well. So please, and I'm going to put his Twitter up in a few. I have not got there yet. It's been a very busy day, but follow Kevin. Kevin D Gods, is it? At Kevin D Gods?
Yeah, I have two Twitters. I have Kevin D Gods with the crypto stuff, and then Kevin Henriksen with kind of more startup and AI stuff.
We're going to put the crypto one up. I'll put both of them up. But give him a follow on Twitter. We'll be showing that throughout the show. We've already had an intro call. Brilliant, man. Awesome conversation about to have. But this is by far the most important stat that I have. We just talked about how I got scammed. Kevin got scammed in college by his apartment manager by faking a fake prepaid cell phone card.
It's crazy. Yeah. So I had an apartment went to UCLA for college and had an apartment on Veteran. And back in the day, got this kind of alert in the mail that, hey, I've got this Sprint bill that, it's got thousands of dollars that's unpaid. And I was like, man, I've never had a Sprint phone. That doesn't make sense. And what the guy had done is when we had moved out of the apartment, it happened to my roommate and a couple other people we found out in the same apartment. He was taking the forwarded mail and applying with our address. And he had all of our information from the application on the apartment and applying for cell phones. And it was he had some way that he would start the cell phone and then he would take prepaid cards out against the cell phone and use those. So it was because we called Sprint and they're like, oh, they've never used the phone. And I'm like, well, how's the bill $2,000? And they're like, oh, well, they're using it as a little mini ATM. So it was the old school sort of hack, definitely IRL. They had mail shipped and yeah.
It's so annoying, kind of wild. Man. I mean, if there's going to be I was talking to my buddy about this, 80% of them are 98% of them are shit bags. And I want to punch them in the throat just to be blunt. But there is 2% that back up against the wall. My family's either going to live or die and I need money. Get that. Do I agree with it? No. Do I empathize with them? Absolutely. But bro, just come on, man. I've done nothing. My whole brand is about being genuine and trying to be kind of give back. You're still going to screw me over. What the hell, dude?
No, it's faceless, right? I mean, it's just opportunistic and faceless.
Yeah. So with that being said, man, we're going right into it. World famous midlife crisis / Mikey G Web3 question. Kevin, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? To reiterate for the audience who is going to listen to the recording or is watching right now for the first time, episode 1 is childhood. Now, why I'm so fascinated about childhood is it deeply changes the way your mindset works the older you get. And this is based off of, I am interested for you in particular, vivid memories. Were there mantras or life lessons that you learned at that age that you still live by today? Were you a tinkerer? Did you play sports? Did you hate technology and now have lived in Silicon Valley for 25 years? I don't know, but I'm interested in that. Episode 2, where you went to school. You said you went to UCLA. You've had this really storied entrepreneurship career. I really am interested here in lessons learned, wins, failures, losses, leadership, mentorship, all of these things. And I love to frame this. All of this should be framed in the fact that you are going to give a word of advice today that's going to fundamentally change somebody's life because they can relate to you as a human being. They like your vibe, and you're going to say a couple sentences and it's going to click for them, right? Because listen, these concepts are not new. Work consistently over a long period of time. Take risk. blah, 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 blah. These all stay the same, but you're going to give a twist that no one's heard before and it's going to help them out. So that's episode 2. Episode 3, how did you find Web3? Why are you interested in Web3? Why are you interested in AI? What are you currently doing now? And what does the next 3 to 6 months look like? Cannot wait to hear it, brother. Have at episode 1 wherever you feel comfortable starting.
Yeah, so cool. Was born in Oakland, so in the Bay Area. Went to school till about first grade, and then we moved to a pig farm in Central California. And so grew up on a pig farm in Central California. People that have been following my Twitter account for a while on the crypto side, I had this kind of saying, "Feed the pigs," and it was something that my dad always would say. And it was, when you grow on a pig farm, that was pretty important to feed the pigs. And so you'd feed them twice a day, once in the morning, and it took about a half hour for two. There's 4 kids, and so 2 kids in the morning for about 30 minutes, and then in the after school, it took usually 2 or 3 of us, and it would take about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on if there was any problems. But
Right.
that was 7 days a week, twice a day.
Oh,
And some days you wake up and the pipes broke or something froze over. Some days you'd wake up and your dog died because it got hit by a car. Some days you'd wake up and your grandma died. Some days you'd wake up, it's freezing cold. Some days you'd wake up, it's 110 in Sacramento.
wow.
Some days you'd have the neighbor tipped over their burn bale and a fire burnt through the back, and you had to let all the pigs out, and then we had to catch them all and put them all back in. Hundreds of pigs. A bunch of them died because they were fighting. But every one of those, it's 7:30 in the morning and it, about 5:30 in the evening, feed the pigs. Like, it just didn't matter. Like, the clock didn't stop. And so I always think of that today as one of the most kind of grounding, but also sort of mantra driving thing for just life and business and work, is that, like, there's certain things. And I think you talked about it with having kids, like, when your kid needs something, you have to do it. Right. And it's just that it doesn't matter what else is going on in your business or whatever. And so there's just this set of priorities. And the feed the pigs thing was like, there were these animals that depended on you because they were, in their pens or in their field or wherever they were, and they needed to be fed, and they and they needed water. Right. And so it was your job to feed it. And so that I think was like the most enduring sort of word. And this feed the pigs thing became like a thing when, shit's going wrong in your startup, things aren't working. You're like, feed the pigs. Like, it's just that you've got to mentally fall back to like, oh yeah, it's all, what's the most important thing that just has to be done at this point in day or point in time. And it kind of reminds you that there's always that thing that you're like, I don't want to do it. I don't feel good, or all these other distractions. It doesn't matter. Like, you have to go do that thing. And so that to me was always probably one of the deeper sort of bring outs.
So I have a question, because I'm interested in this. When does it, because this is reflection, right? Like, when you're feeding the pigs and you're 8 years old, you're like, I hate life. This is bullshit. When do you think you like finally had a feed the pigs? Like, because I'm always interested in, I understood principles from a really young age, right? A lot of different things I thought I understood, but I didn't really understand what it meant, right? Do you see what I'm getting there?
Yeah. No, like, we hated it on the farm. Like, and my dad's thing was simple. He was like, yeah, it's no problem. When you leave the farm, we sell 25% of the livestock. And so we sold, and that was your college fund. You got your, whatever money that was that, and that was good luck. And if college doesn't work out or you don't like it, you can always have a job on the farm and come back. Dude, nobody came back. All 4 of us got graduated college, went to college, and never came back. Come back to visit, but definitely not to work. And so I think there was this, but in retrospect, and I overheard him telling this story many years later. I was after college, actually, and he was like, "Oh, I wasn't raising pigs on that farm. I was raising children."
Oh,
and it was like his whole thing. And the way he figured this out is he was in the Navy, and when he was going to boot camp in the Navy, half the kind of new recruits loved it. They're like, this is amazing. Wake up every morning, get some food, do some exercise, do some school, do some exercise, get food, and do some exercise and sleep. They're like, this is amazing.
And they probably came from a shitty place, right?
Or they came from farms. They were all rural kids that grew up with like, dude, this is all I got to do is get up and eat and go to sing. Like, life is easy. And then he's like, there was a bunch of kids that grew up in the city, or they grew up in a chill life, and they're like, this sucks. I'm like working and having to do this thing, and people are telling me what to do. And so it was this incredible reflection that my dad saw, where like the people that grew up in a farm life, they had built this resilience and grit and sort of like understanding of what perseverance meant and what it meant to do something every day and put focus on it. that it made boot camp really easy.
Right.
And so he's like, well, when I raise kids, I want to do it on a farm. And like, again, my dad was an airline pilot. He was gone half the time. And so we were alone with my mom, who was an inner city school teacher. So she was not like, grew up on an expert. And so we learned the farming as kids. And, by the time we were in high school, we were, arguably better farmers and definitely way more of the labor than my father was or my parents were.
Right.
So yeah,
Dude.
that was the thing, is he learned it to kind of there, and then he kind of applied it. But yeah, I didn't click for me until, probably well into my second job.
Right. No, dude, fascinating insight. And this is jumping ahead further. That feed the pigs, out of everything I've been through for my life. So I did the whole, like I told you, I did the whole corporate grind, went up the ladder, did really cool things, right? And not until I almost died that I kind of reflect, maybe I don't want to spend the rest of my life in corporate America, and let's try new things. What I'm getting at is, not until going through all of this experience and having some self-realizations did I really click for me that it is just that: feed the pigs consistently over a long period of time and good things will happen. Can you argue, with everything you've been through, is there a more valuable lesson than that? Or is that top dog for you?
I mean, I think it's a good question. I think there's other lessons, but I don't think any are as, quite frankly, simplistic enough. And, it comes out in different ways. People are like, do the work, be consistent. Like, there's different ways. For me, it's just very like ingrained in a very different thing, where like, it's one thing to say, do the work, but a lot of people haven't been challenged at that point. And so they didn't have, in my case, 16 years or 17 years living on a farm, to sort of do that, 7 days a week for, you do the math, is a lot of reps,
Yes.
And so, and even to this day, I don't think there's anything, even, quote unquote, building companies in Silicon Valley for 25 years, that I've done as consistently, no days off. Like, no, there was days off because you like trade with your brothers and sisters or something, but like you would get some like breather, but not anything like that. And it fits almost everything you want to do, whether it's life, work, relationships, whatever. And so, yeah, it's a tough to beat that lesson.
I agree, man.
From a grounding point of view.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't beat that. And it's amazing for somebody like you to reflect on that and agree with that. And like you said, it comes in many different forms, but I think it's the consistent part for me. Like, and this follows up the next question, right? Because we have this conversation a lot on this podcast with a lot of really brilliant, intelligent people. Social media has really thrown a mind fuck on us. And one of the things that I think it has done is this now mentality. Hence why Web3 gets so toxic so quickly, is everyone is convinced they can be a millionaire overnight. We've got a small percentage of people controlling the narrative who are actually getting rich, and nobody else is getting rich. But the question to me is, how do you define a long period? Because I think if you would ask somebody on New York City street, if I interviewed 100 people, what is doing something for a long time, over a long period of time, they'd say a year. What is long for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in like the chapters are like, I think at the very least, like 4-year vesting. I'm in Silicon Valley, so like you fund a company, you vest over 4 years is like the typical sort of like model.
Yeah.
And so like, and when you start a company, typically you're like, it's going to take 2 laps, right? It's going to take 4 and 4. So it's like, it's an 8-year thing when you start a new company. And look, a lot of them don't make it that far. But you need to think about it, if it is going to work, to be that kind of, that kind of run. It's going to have to be, multiple years. I think a year is definitely, I mean, again, for diet or something else, you can make a lot of changes inside of a year for sure. But I think if you're really building something to endure, if you're building something where you want compound interest or compound effort to like work, it's going to have to be years.
Yep.
And so, I think it's, yes, 2 is years, 3 is years. I think it started to get like 4 or 5 kind of model where you're just like, okay, that's a chunk.
Dude, I've got one of the smartest people in Silicon Valley telling me everything that I believe in with my soul, which is good. I say 5 years minimum. That's me. 4 to 5 years minimum. you better be looking at 8 to 10 years more likely. And here's the hard pill to swallow. And I want your advice on this too, because I think this is fascinating. You think about 8 to 10 years, like that's a long time, right? And then you can go 8 to 10 years and utterly fail that entire time.
Yeah.
What is your like how do you deal with that? How do you handle that? Because you probably see it all the time, right? And that is, yeah, and I'm interested in your opinion of the fact that, like, listen, I hear be comfortable with failure. Well, no shit, Sherlock. You can say that a bajillion times, but like, what does that actually mean? Like, how, what is your personal thought on that? Like, how do you get over that? Or did you
Yeah,
never
I
get
mean,
over it and you're just dumb enough to start again?
no,
Like,
there's definitely people that don't get over it, and that can be go for life, that can go for business, and you see people that sort of like hit a wall and really struggle to get past that and end up in taking years to kind of like whether it's
yeah,
therapy or different, hit rock bottom. You've heard all these kind of stories. I think for me, I'm a naturally like to a fault optimistic person. I really struggle I run into the same problems again and again sometimes because I just like, man, I literally forget yesterday. I don't want to talk about it I don't
yeah,
want to think about yesterday. I don't want to think about the history. I want to just and it's not that I'm like blind to it. It's just that I'm so excited about like the next thing and to a fault, right? Like I
yeah.
will like eat my food to the point that I'm choking because I'm eating so fast because I really want to get back to whatever I was working on. Oh, I had this thing loaded up and I've got this tab that is half cooking on some chat thing. I'm working on some AI thing, or I've got, cursor running and I know it's going to take 6 minutes to run through this thing or 10 minutes. And so I go to get some food and I come back and I'm like horsing it down because I see it finished and I want to work on it. And so like
Yeah.
it happens to me like in a daily thing where I'm constantly like looking for the next thing. But I do think that at least for me, like while I do get down or I'm like bummed, I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Like it's the wow, like there's a lot of opportunity, a
Yeah.
lot of opportunity here. The fact that I have this problem of a busy calendar, a busy schedule, uh, more people that, want to take time from me or take money from me than I have ability to sort of support or be with. Um, it is an envious position. And so I think that and reminding myself of that, my wife does a great job of grounding me. She doesn't
Yeah.
read my newsletter.
Yeah.
She doesn't read, the stuff that I create on purpose. She's just like, I hear enough of it. And so it's funny, right? But like, it's also like that sort of ability to say, hey, there's an optimistic sort of view. And I think like technology people in general are optimists, right? If you're a programmer and you're writing code, you're constantly solving problems. Oh, it doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do that. It's all the things it doesn't do,
Yeah.
right? That's why you're having to still work on it.
Yeah.
And so you're eternally optimistic that like the next change, the next thing will fix it or make it better or whatever. And so I
Right.
think that and to me, that's just so exciting, right? Like I just want to get in there and keep playing with it and trying new toys and saying, what can this one do? Or how can this,
Yep.
technology do something different or better? And so to me, that's the way I pull out of like the dark times is just like there's light ahead, head up. Like what's the next thing? There's a sunrise tomorrow for sure.
Yep.
Somewhere, maybe not if it's cloudy where I'm at, but it's
Somewhere.
sunrise somewhere.
Yep.
And sort of the opposite of the 5 o'clock somewhere. I don't drink anymore. And so like that, the alcohol thing, just health and stuff like that. And so for me, like the mental model of like, oh, what's the positive view of it's 5 o'clock somewhere? There's a sunrise somewhere. It's going to be good somewhere. Like it may just take some time to burn off when you're feeling down. Like there's got to be exciting things. Like just close your laptop, close your phone for a minute.
Dude, I relate to so much that you said. One, uh, I mean, you can relate to this, or you just talked about the alcohol more than health issues, but I will flat out say this: alcohol is poison in your body, and if you're abusing it, like there's just no, which is crazy though to me, because like I've worked with some very high level functioning alcoholics, and they do some amazing things. But to think that if they weren't drinking, they could have been like exponentially better than they were, like that's like shit, man. That's crazy. So my advice to everybody listening now, yes, have a drink here and there, but I was a product of I lived the advertise. I was Don Draper, man. I lived Don Draper for 15 years. And guess what you do when you're Don Draper?
Yeah.
You drink a shit ton of alcohol and you're going to all the fancy restaurants, and that's part of the game you got to play. You've done it in Silicon Valley as well too. And it just doesn't end well. It just never, I've never seen anybody go through that situation and come out the other end and was like, you know what? I feel fucking great.
Yeah.
It just
No,
doesn't
it's
end.
tough. And for me, it's sleep's the same way. Like I was just, like in early startups,
Mhm.
we did this whole, like we'd work till 8, 10, 12, midnight, 2 in the morning, keep grinding on code and working.
Yeah.
And then you thought you were productive and you'd sleep in the office 4 or 5 hours if it was a really big sprint, and you'd get up at 6 a.m. and at the time we didn't have DoorDash and stuff. So we'd have to actually walk to the 7-Eleven or something and get some shitty taquitos or whatever. And a bunch of, Red Bull equivalent, right? It was like Jolt and all this garbage, like caffeine infused stuff back then. But man, there's just, when you were sort of look out and zoom out at that time and look back and be like, hey, was that year a productive year? Like, was that actually worth it? Was working 16, 18-hour days actually effective? And the answer is absolutely not. Like, you would have been way better sleeping 8 hours at night. And again, I, told my kids this, that are 2 of them are in college, one's in high school. It's like, man, if you just sleep 8 hours, like, and go to bed, close the laptop, close the book, whatever, I can assure you, waking up tomorrow, you'll have a clearer thought, you'll have better mind, and you'll actually be better off than trying to grind out another hour. Just do 15 minutes in the morning on the way to your school or whatever class you're going to do, and you'll actually be more effective. You'll make a better decision. And I think that's very true of code, of business, just decisions. You're not a sharp person after, 10, 15 hours of like work, and not having some time to let your brain relax.
Dude, I think of myself, I think like my max cap is for 5 hours max of like deep work. And even in that period, I need to take like 10-minute breaks and step away. But this concept, and this is bad in Web3 too, right? Grind, grind, grind. You're not grinding hard enough. It's all about being in the trenches, blah, 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 blah. It's all bullshit, man. Like, it's just, again, people giving you the FOMO out that you're not doing the right thing, when in reality, like, who am I going to take advice from? Web3 trenches or Kevin, who has sold big companies and is reflecting back on what worked and what didn't work? You guys should probably listen to this podcast and not crypto Twitter at all, to be honest.
No, I mean, I do think there are games where highly attentive and young folks can play, right? Like, I think there are games like going viral on social media and being on social media 22 hours a day. By far, their accounts are going to be more popular and going to get more traffic, and it's going to get fed up. And there's an adrenaline and sort of a Pavlovian loop there. But I think back to when we were kids, it was like affiliate marketing or sneaker bots. There's drop shipping kind of had an e-com run. There's a lot of these things where it's like, if you just put in the hours and you're like, trading for like, swapping sneakers or something, you're like, yeah, there is a business to be built there, but it's not scalable. It's not enduring. You're constantly cat and mouse kind of finding the little alpha and the track there. You're not really investing, and you're not building something for the long term. And I think a lot of like some of the meme coin stuff, like, could look that way, where you're like, yeah, if you do spend the time, you can outwork, or you can put in more time than the person that's not in, for a smart poker was like this when I, like in the 2028, like the moneymaker days of poker. Like, I was playing online poker, 8 tables. I had a little Postgres database that was scraping the tables and building player profiles. It was great. And you could play like 25 cent, 50 cent, 8 tables at the same time, only play aces and kings, and grind out a little effort, and a little profit. But it's like, those kind of things aren't enduring for a bunch of reasons. And so I think that's the chance, that it looks like you're making progress and you are beating a lot of people with your effort, if you're smart and you're quantitative, sort of like biased. But I think that the long-term sort of effects of that, and could you, the other test I always say is, can you take 2 weeks off, and does the business or whatever you're doing like grow in value? Like, I can take 2 weeks off from my investments, or 2 weeks off from some passive income kind of stuff. I can take 2 weeks off from a well-oiled and well-managed team, and it mostly works, and you kind of keeps growing. That's not the truth when you're like, there's not a system to it. There's not a scalable sort of approach.
Exactly. And listen, I am not shitting on people that want to work very, very hard. I actually think you should have some seasons where you grind for, but to your point, one, it's not enduring. It's just not sustainable, healthy. And The other thing is, and this is the difference, and I think this takes experience and time, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'd love your insight on this, is a majority of the things that we see, especially in crypto Web3, it's not mission driven. The mission is to make as much money as possible in a quick amount of time. And I promise you, if that's your end goal, that doesn't end well either, right? And so, what are your thoughts on that? Just
Yeah,
being
I
mission
actually was
driven
talking to a
versus—
guy
Go ahead.
recently, and he was like, "Well, what do you think of the downturn? What do you think of the timeline?" I was like, "Well, most of my sort of crypto is like in Bitcoin or something. So yeah, it's down a little bit, but it's not like it's down 99% or 90 or 50% or something or 70%. And again, I'm thinking long term. I'm not trying to like look at the price of like what it's doing today or tomorrow. I'm trading." And he was like, no, you don't understand though. He's like, a lot of people in crypto, 2x isn't going to do it for them. They have to hit a 10x or a 20x or whatever. And that's when I was like, well, I understand that perspective.
Yeah.
But I think that's a bad, like trying to, this is, make it in a trade, right? Or hit a 20x or hit a 10x. Like typically those aren't scalable. So, you're not able to apply a lot of capital against 10x because it's like, if it's a real actual alpha or investment, there will be lots of capital coming after it.
Right.
And it's typically not going to happen without putting in, a lot of compounding work. And the problem or the benefit of the algorithms is the algorithms always find those. Because if I see a 10x or 100x and I want to celebrate a friend or even a friend of a friend or whatever, or you look at it, you're like, I'm curious. Everybody's guilty of clicking on that, which basically votes that the algorithm saying that's a good thing.
Yes.
And of course, then that sends it up.
Yep.
But what they don't see is, you look at the stats and you can see it on chain, 99%, 94, 98, some version of really high 90s are net losers.
Yeah.
And it's a PvP game.
Yeah.
And I think the casinos are very similar. When you go to Vegas, those big buildings were not built, based on the fees from the entertainment or the restaurants. They were built on the slot machines and the table games, right? Like, you're like, oh, it's built on Vegas and it's a really profitable restaurant business, or really profitable to see, Garth Brooks play a concert or Adele or something, pick an expensive one. That didn't build the Wynn, right? That didn't build Caesars. It was built on the ground floor.
On your gambling money, people.
Yeah, it was built on gambling money. Yeah. And so I think, and that's okay. It's entertainment. And I think, again, if you treat it as entertainment and you have a budget for it and you think of it as entertainment, and yeah, sometimes you go to Vegas and you do win. Sometimes you go and you come out ahead. But, over a 20-year period of going to the casinos or going to Reno, if you're in the Bay Area kind of thing, most people will not come out ahead, right? But of course, you won't read about that. You'll read about the person that went 3 times or has been going for 20 years and won every time, because that's an N of very small. But social media and the algorithms are incredible at bringing those to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's interesting because it's honestly the same principle, but right now, that narrative, instead of like, hundreds of millions are engineered on how to lay out a casino floor, and there's very smart people to try to maximize their profits.
Yeah.
We're in the same situation. It is just people's voices on crypto Twitter engineering how to maximize burning your cash for their gain. And it's really frustrating to me that people just don't have this conversation more. Because I still, for some odd, it's still young, I guess, and I get it, and I think Twitter is a pretty toxic damn place, so that the platform is unfortunate as well too. I don't know, how do you solve it, man? Do you, if it's always money driven, if it's always, because it's still financial speculation, is hence why crypto and even Web3 is a thing, I think. Yes, there's blockchain technology and there's real builders in the background, but what we have now is because I can make 100x overnight if I'm lucky, right?
Yeah.
How do you change this ecosystem?
I don't know if you, and again, like I don't think you go after it and try to quote unquote solve it. I think a lot of these like short-term plays kind of run their course, right? And we've seen this, how many different sort of cycles have we seen? They happen a lot faster in crypto. They're very incentivized, which is why, they grow so fast. People gets excited about it. They're, presenting their bags or the anti-bags or whatever. And so there's a lot of like engagement, and crypto is a perfect for Twitter. And that's why it kind of lives there. But I think when you look at like other early platforms, early startups in the .com days, even when we've launched new email protocols, they were constantly abused and used for spamming and phishing and all kinds of bad things. And while that still happens today, more of the good traffic has kind of washed it away and sort of made that a much smaller piece. And people are a lot savvier of what to do and not to do. MLMs were a big craze in like the 80s. There's still MLMs today, right? Like that's kind of the original sort of like pyramid scheme, multi-level marketing stuff. They're still there. But a lot less of them. And the ones that are there are much more, people know what they are and they're enduring and they've been around for a long time. You have like a Mary Kay where you're like, man, this is kind of like, it's got its problems. And I'm sure, but there's a lot of people that have been around where there's ones that have come out, flash in the pan, go crazy and then don't. And so I think like we've seen this in other industries before. We've seen even in the tech world, right? We saw in the early days, like the Junipers and the Ciscos of the world getting crazy investments because they were going to build the routers that were going to turn the internet into whatever. And like in early 2000, 2001, 2099, man, there was so much investment going into like hardware routers. And now, of course, a couple of those companies endured and they made it. Most didn't. But what they left was actually some pretty cool infrastructure because we're here streaming and talking through big, underwater cables from our two destinations. Pretty exciting, right? And so I think crypto is similar, where there's a lot of the battle-tested pieces. Pump.fun, for the good and the bad of what it did, it's battle-tested a lot of Solana. It's battle-tested a lot of the wallets. Now we have Time.fun that's kind of like been the recent one, which is like, hey, you can trade for time and, different. But again, I can assure you Time.fun and its scalable whatever will very rarely reach the Pump.fun sort of excitement that it'll take a long time to catch those same peaks in terms of excitement.
Right.
But the technology has created this ability to sort of now build on top of the shoulders of what, the ruins arguably of some of these, previous tech things that have sort of carved in their way.
Dude, fascinating conversation. And I'm glad that you brought this up because I think that's is actually part of the narrative, right? Is to reflect and understand that this is just part of the process. I think it's funny because I talk, my wife, like you said, my wife if she hears me say, hey, my name is Mike. I was born in DC, grew up in Maryland, went to Penn State. Like that's the beginning of like who I am in my intro call. She wants to puke, right? But even her knowing that who I am as an individual, that I've built businesses, that I've been doing this for 5 years, if I talk to her, it's a scam, right? Everything I do is a scam. Why are you spending your time doing scam stuff?
I think the Bybit one really was a great example this week, right? I mean, like seeing the Bybit lose that kind of money. I mean, 1.5 billion in one hit.
Yes.
Biggest ever.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, if those, I was in a meeting with a bunch of AI founders last night and they're like, how did that happen? They're like, why would I be in crypto if like the guys that are holding the Fort Knox of crypto, the Bybit, lost 1.5 billion in a single hack. It's like, how do they protect their, few $1,000 that they're putting in a wallet, or like, do they use Coinbase or whatever, like there is this, and again, it is the most negative thing that something happened, but that gets way more press than all the good stuff that was created in the last 12 months of crypto. That story, just like FTX, when it happened, those stories lead, if it bleeds, it leads. You've heard it, right? Like crypto leads that and the algorithms lead for that. And it's unfortunate. But that's just part of the nature of building something in this space.
It's a part of evolving in any technology too. But I think that actually is part of the answer because we don't have this conversation much on this podcast. Is just learning from history, right? Like this is going to happen again. And I think the only thing we can do is each time these cycles happen, just get a little bit better. Same principle as a human in life, right? Dude, we've gone totally off script. This is already fantastic conversation. I do want to rein it back just a little bit. Holy shit, man. We've been going for 45 minutes and we just like got one tidbit of your childhood. So let's do this. We can kind of skip to the college unless there's anything else from like that childhood, maybe teenage years that like you think profoundly impacted you as you're kind of reflecting back. It really kind of foundational to who you are.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think like I love tinkering. I, took more things apart than I fixed, broke things with, my mom would always joke. She's like, man, you guys spend more time, welding and putting together your go-kart or your motorbike than you do outright. You ride it for 10 minutes and break it, and then you're back in the garage for 3 days to fix it. And so definitely have that tinkering sort of mindset of love, just pulling things apart and loving how they work. Yeah, went to UCLA for mechanical engineering, thought I was going to build airplanes and cars, but sort of found out that, in the career of somebody in aerospace engineering, you maybe build one airplane, maybe two, in a 40-year career. And in cars, you might build two or three, right? Where sort of discovered the internet. It was the first time I had Ethernet. It was just dial up when I was at the house growing up as a kid. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. Technology is amazing. So sort of self-taught websites. And I'm like, man, you can just make a change and then refresh it and it loads in your, Netscape browser. Back in the day, I was like, this is incredible. And so, yeah, kind of stumbled into software. And then, being in software in 99, 2000, the internet was the thing. And so, yeah, kind of that became the early story of getting to Silicon Valley.
So you said already so many fascinating things here. There's two topics that come up a lot. We'll go over to the two topics are schooling and then timing and luck. Fascinating conversations. Let's start with schooling. You have been around this Silicon Valley startup for a long, long time. The face of education has changed drastically over the last 20 years of our lives. What is your perspective on college and education and you have kids, right? What is your advice to them about that? It's it's a fascinating topic to me, but also can be like heatedly debated as well as to what the right or wrong path is. Love your thoughts in general.
Yeah, I think the key thing that the first crack when you look at colleges that you're like, hey, they're there to learn something, is I think that the piece that people miss is what you learn. And it's not what you learn in class. It's all the other stuff around social skills, how to live on your own, how to manage finances, how to deal with problems without being able to have your, mom or dad walk in the room and solve it. Or, they call and come pick you up from school because something didn't work out. How do you go to the doctor when you're sick? And so to me, my advice to the kids is like, hey, have fun, man. Like, go to school, study hard, have fun. Don't get in too much trouble. But like, it is an incredible way to like experience new things and be on your own and make good and bad decisions in a somewhat safe place. It's a lot safer to make dumb decisions in college than it is to make dumb decisions after you've left college, you have a job, and now, you find yourself in some kind of financial issue, or you make a poor decision and you don't have a bunch of college buddies to kind of hang out with you and bring you home or whatever. Right. Like, so I do think that like college provides a relatively safe, and somewhat semi-sheltered, I guess, way of like kind of graduating from like living at home to like, kind of getting closer to the real world. It's far from the real world, but it's closer. I also think the degrees and what you study, again, should be some version of your passion and all that. Like, but I think the other piece is, build a skill that when you do come out, you can decide if you want to use that skill or not. Right. And I think for all the things, like even for me, I mean, I went to school for something that I never used directly, but I learned that I didn't like to do that. Right. Or I preferred something else different. And so I think it's okay to take a major or take a bunch of classes that you think you'll enjoy and learn that you didn't actually enjoy them as much as you thought. Way cheaper to figure that out in college than it is to figure that out in, your third job. And so I think, so for me, I think college is a great place to get an education. My view is that 70 or 80% of that education is unrelated to academics, and it's very related to life, what you're going to do, how you're going to make friends, how you're going to make relationships, how you're going to, start to build a network, understand the value of, simple things, right? Keep your passport renewed, have your birth certificate when you needed to go do something, be able to bring an ID and a credit card when you go check into the hospital because you've got some kind of sickness and it's not going away and it's been a while and you're going to have to go to urgent care or something, or if it's become so bad that you're going to the emergency room because urgent care is not open at 2 a.m. when you finally realize that, man, this sore throat is debilitating, or this fever is now serious and you're so dehydrated you can't walk and you're passing out. I mean, there's all these like bad stories of like friends that sent kids to college and had really serious medical issues and things like that because the kid, normally they're like, hey man, Jimmy or Billy, Jenny, you're not looking good. Can, we go take you to urgent care? That happens when you're in high school or at home. there's no one to kind of safety check you in college unless you have friends that are aware of that. And so I think
Yeah.
all those things, I think college is wonderful. So why I think the Peter Thiel thing of like, hey, here's $100,000 to go skip college or, go right from high school to work, I think is great for some people. I do think that most people are going to be more successful growing up in a kind of pseudo real life university type experience away from home.
Totally agree, man. And I think it's just unfortunate that, and this is where I also think I get frustrated with being a content creator and just trying to be an entrepreneur this day and age, is that it seems like more and more this day and age I hear these, every opinion is like a black and white. You must do this or you must do that. And it's like that's just not how life works. It's a bunch of grays, man.
Yeah.
And like it works for a lot of people. Another thing is like, hey, if you're going to get a general arts degree and you have no money and you're thinking about taking out hundreds of thousands of $100,000 to get a loan for that at a mid to bottom tier college, probably don't want to do that. Like that's probably not a good financial decision. But if you can go to a UCLA or a Berkeley or a top higher end school and get what you said, but are financially comfortable to do that, maybe that get a scholarship, take some loans out, but not debilitating loans. And then two, get the access to the network, man. Like this, Silicon Valley, the network is just so huge, right? So those are the two benefits. But one thing that I love about you is, and I think it's already like this is why I like to have the conversation we have. We've already peeled back the layers of the onion. We got the pig story, but I already can tell that like you are like me, optimist, half glass full. You're easily excitable. I am too, which is fantastic. But the fact that you have been through what this like pressure cooker, because I worked downtown San Francisco at a startup, it was fucking miserable. I worked, it was fun, but it was like, it's not everyone can pull it off, right? Not everyone can go through that. And that's a pressure cooker type environment. But you still have this like, if you're reflecting on this part of your life, learn, have fun, be relaxed. How much of that kind of chill vibe and mantra is just inherent, or is that learned over time through introspection, reflection?
Yeah, it's definitely not inherent. I think I'm generally an anxious person. Um, and definitely my 20s and 30s was like frantic and stuff. And I think and even today, like I think there's still things that will get me emotionally triggered and excited
Mm.
about things or passionate about things, depending on how you want to look at it. I think for me though, the piece that was definitely learned is just like, again, that sort of sleep cycle. We used to do a lot of meditation when we were building a Comply. Like we had this Headspace app. My co-founder Javier was like incredible, man. He had like this 400 or 500 day streak on Headspace. Um, and it was like, you just lock in for 10, 15 minutes on the train or, he rode the ferry sometimes. But I would ride the train from down south. And yeah, it was just a great way to sort of lock in and freshen up. And I think for me now, this notion of like, yeah, you want to work hard, but you also need to take breaks. And I think you said it earlier, like, yeah, my thing is like, yeah, you can work 4 or 5 hours at a time. Like you got to take a break, but even then split it up. And I got addicted to the 4 hour work week, like Tim Ferriss and stuff when
Oh
that book
yeah.
came out. And to me today, I'm like, well, I want to work the 4 hour work week, but I want to do like 8 or 10 of them during a week, like, little blocks of these little sprints. And I work on different projects and different companies and things like that. And so that allows that to work really well. Think
Right.
highly about systems, delegation, elimination, automation, all that kind of like jazz. Super like obsessed with that kind of thing. And with my health, same thing. But I think for me, to your specific question, as I got into my 40s, I'm 47 now. And as I
Uh-huh.
got into my 40s, really realized that, you know, it wasn't just as easy to like eat really shitty or like, do, not sleep and be like, oh, I'm going to be back or, do jet lag and just be like, yeah, that's fine. I'll just do it. You have to be a little more thoughtful and
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah.
And I think that part of it is at least slowed me down enough to be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, am I gonna, am I planning my day correctly? Is this thing stacked? Is there breaks in there? Do I schedule some self-care so I can go out and, have some time with my family or schedules, so I have to be like more deliberate, I guess, about taking breaks.
Yeah.
And that's not just like take a break and, go take a, walk around the house. it's like, no, actually go do something, take a Saturday morning or a half a day off, or, to go and not be on a computer or a phone. Right. And I actually I have this habit tracker thing. I track a bunch of stuff on my phone. And one of them is like, did I have like a device free sort of block of time with
Yeah.
my wife and daughter? Right. Like, and cause it's like, and actually set a goal for myself this year to have, more than like 20 of those every month, right? Where like in the past, it's like you're constantly jumping in for a few minutes here and there. You'll check something. It's like, no. Like, can you go block out a big block of time?
Right.
Whether that's a meal and you're going to go into an activity or do something, but like actually be able to break away. And that's been, hard to get used to be honest, but it's been pretty refreshing. And I think that creates this sort of emotional resilience, if you want to call it that, of just kind of being able to chill out and just be a little more thoughtful about, if your day is getting busy, you better block out a day. And one little thing that I always think about is that, imagine something happening where you had to like emergency take a day off work, like parents sick, kids, sick, something where you're like, that just wasn't surprise, like, death in the family, right? You're just like, death in the family. And so like, to me, it's like, there is a way, like if you had a death in the family or something that was like, I don't know what it is, but this is going to clear my schedule for the next 48 hours and I'm going to go away to do this thing. It's possible. The problem is people don't think about just adding that in their schedule or something of that. We're like, hey man, you just need to like give yourself an emergency schedule clearer and just take 48 hours to go, do some mental health, some physical something, and just go do something else and not think about work. It's possible. You think it's impossible, but it's actually possible, because if it actually had a bad emergency, you'd do it. But you need to create that emergency for yourself. And I think that builds a lot of resilience.
100%, dude. And I see, this is, like I said in the beginning, before we even talk, like this is a prime example of a moment in the conversation that I think is amazing for people to hear, because you just said you were an anxious person and a little all over the place in your 20s to 30s, but you coming to that realization. I think the goal of a podcast like this and these messages are, can we help people that haven't had this realization yet just come to it a little bit earlier, right? Because I had, my version of it is I was Don Draper and living the big life in LA, shooting commercials, and then my life comes to a screeching halt with a, mental illness, depressive order, almost died. And that was when I was like, well, shit, man, I need to reflect very hard quickly on what the hell am I doing with my life? And I think we're making the world a better place if me and you can tell our story and continue to have these conversations, and somebody maybe realizes that a little bit more. Because to your point, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody like this. And I actually, since you said it, have thought this to myself too. It's like, if right now something happened and I had to do nothing tomorrow related to my business or my work, and I just had to concentrate on family, guess what? The day after, everything would be fine. Even the VPs of VPs said tomorrow's the most critical day. You must be in that meeting. If you were not in that meeting, the world would go on, right? And it's such a hard concept to understand and digest. And it's, I'm reading, I forget what the name of the book is, but it's the typical process that everybody's gone through. They had these self-realizations. This guy, and he was on Wall Street. He was a multimillionaire by 30, drinking 7 nights a week, about to get divorced, hated his life, right? But had everything everyone told him that he should have and wanted. And the first thing he goes and does is interview 1,500 people that are in their 70s at the youngest.
Oh, is this Die with Zero?
No, it's a different. I'm just saying
because Bill's incredible. I just read that book again for the second time, and it's like incredible, because it's a similar thing where he's like, crushing on Wall Street has made it, and he's like, wait, what's actually important is to like figure out how to spend it and really maximize your longevity of like a useful life and not just a long life.
Yeah. So my point is, this has actually been done thousands of times, but everybody always immediately goes to the people at the end of their life. What do they care about? Exactly that. Resilience through the body, through the mind, through the soul, and spend as much time as humanly possible with people you love. That is it at the end of the day. It is that simple, but we make it so freaking complex. And my version that I can add on to this is, I had the high-paying job in downtown San Francisco. I suffered from almost death mental illness. And when I got out of it, I made my 3 pillars: financial freedom, flexibility, and friends and family. And I made the very unpopular decision to sell my very expensive home in the Bay Area and move in with my in-laws because it acquired all three of those pillars. They were retiring. They would have been, they wanted some help, and it allowed us the flexibility. We were going through a lot of trying to have a son, and that was super expensive, right? But I made these decisions to get to the things that we are talking about now. And sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions to get you there. Gary Vee is very good at talking about this as well too, right? He's like, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's like, no, but like, dude, if you love taking pictures and if you can live off 70 grand a year and that's what makes you excited about life, do it. You don't have to sell your company for $1 billion, right? And I think that message just needs to resonate more with people. So thank you for sharing your version of that.
No,
We got to get to Web3, brother, because we've been talking for an hour. I got you till 4. We only got 20 minutes left, but I cannot not say, bro, we're just going to have multiple more podcasts. I don't know, but maybe we'll turn like one newsletter a month into the Mikey G. Kevin podcast, and we'll just talk about fun stuff. But so the middle part, TLDR, because I can't imagine the wealth of knowledge that you've learned from being in one of the hotbeds of innovation and just creativity and different minds within the world, right? And again, reflect on, and I say top 2 to 3 learning lessons. I'm going to go with learning lessons and start there. And then I'm going to follow it up with biggest mistakes, because I think that's actually, let's start there. Your 3 biggest mistakes that you think you've made throughout this process, because I think that's a way more interesting question.
Yeah, I think the first one we talked about, which is like, just working too hard, putting in too many hours, not sleeping enough, it's like drinking, go play poker at night, come back, work. It's just like burning the candle at both ends, super unhealthy. So I think that's like number 1. If I had to do it over again, I think number 2, thinking deeply about like, and again, I'm way better about this, is like, what is the shareholder value? Like what's the ultimate value of the thing you're building? Ooh. And I think a lot of the stuff early on, you're building for a metric that doesn't matter. And you're like, no, but if I was a shareholder, if this was a public company, or if this was like, had made it farther than whatever project, and this can go for the smallest of projects and smallest thing. It's like, what's the output? And I think sometimes you need to be okay with that shareholder value being yourself and your own ability to learn. And it's your investing in shares in your education. But I do think a lot of times startups and small teams, and even teams inside of big companies, start to do work and build calloused teams around work that's not effective and is not driving shareholder value. And so I almost think of like, if you look at like what Elon did with Twitter or Doge or whatever, and say, what were the 5 things you achieved? Or, are you actually doing work that's driving shareholder value? If the shareholders could vote on your last, month of work, would they think that's, valuable? And I think a lot of cases, especially when you get into big organizations, it's just natural that things get misaligned. And so I think that's a mistake that, a lot of companies continue to make, especially as they get larger. They start to do things that aren't adding directly value. And they think they're helping by, I'm a middle tier, infrastructure team, or I'm an ops team that's helping. And I always zoom it out to really simple stuff: either build shit or sell shit. And like, if you're not on the edge of either of those, you're typically in the way, especially as a company gets bigger. And so, you need to be producing the thing that we sell, or actually selling and taking money from customers, and actually having that transaction. All of the other things around sales operations, sales management, project management, leadership, all these other things need to be directly supporting the sell shit and build shit side, right? And if you're not like absolutely loved by the engineers that are writing the code, and absolutely loved by the top, 20% of the sales staff in your company, you've probably got an opportunity to do more impactful work for the company. And I'll leave it at that. And like, I think there's other ways to sort of look at it, but I think that to me is like probably the biggest lesson that I see today that companies continue to make and could improve on.
I love that insight. Here's a question for you, because I know, working for large corporations, I feel like this is my personal take. And since you've seen this at a different levels from the beginning to the end, my personal opinion is being public and having shareholders is the beginning, the death of a company, anyways, because it seems like all decisions in my mind from leadership are just about profitability, but they do it in a wrong way. Is that just a naive view? Or is it more to what you said that people at the top are just tone deaf to making shareholder value? What is happening here? Because it seems like every major corporation I work for, to your point, the same shit show happens. So like what is the real root of the cause there?
Yeah, I think it's a really complex problem to be first.
Yes.
I think it's a super multivariant, super, who's the person? Is it internal people complaining, external? But I do think the challenge of being a public company is there's a price on your value.
Yes.
And the problem is that value doesn't really relate to what you're doing in a given day or a given time, or even over like sometimes even a medium period of time. And it looks a lot like, I think if we look back at either some of these, Web3 project leaders that are tokenized, right? Whether it was NFTs or tokens, where it's like, what did you do for me lately? Oh, the floor price is down. You must have taken a day off, which I think crypto like exacerbated that effect of the like, what's the number? If floor price goes up, you must have done a good job. And if floor price goes down, you must have done a bad job. I think that's a stock market view. I also think there's counterpoints to this. If you look at, I think the two that I like to look at a lot is Bezos at Amazon and then Buffett at Berkshire. And both of those very different styles, very different industries, very different approach. But both of them are kind of like a little bit like, not going to do it the way that the market wants me to do it. Like, how many years did Amazon essentially tread water or, sort of stay unprofitable to reinvesting in infrastructure to today? Like, obviously their infrastructure powers a good part of all of the world in a bunch of ways, whether it's transportation or AWS or cloud or AI or whatever. And I think similar with Buffett, he was very contrarian in a lot of his bets, but he's like, man, I'm not trying to optimize for stock price. I'm on to optimizing for owning good businesses over time. And, of course, like he said, it worked, right? And it compounded aggressively at the very late stage of his career, right? As you kind of, he's almost 100 now. And like that sort of arc, he put in his 40 or 50 years of buying good companies and sort of being patient and really running them in the right way, not trying to optimize on output or share price or profitability, just saying, hey, I'm buying good companies with good managers, good teams. And I think, and I'll take a quick one on your good side, which is, it's the people that you have around you, the people that you hire and the people that trust to be on your team. And it was one of the biggest questions I'd ask when I'd interview people is, especially managers. If you're interviewing for a manager role on my team, I'd ask you like, hey, who are the top 2 people that you would hire when you join? Like, who's going to follow you to this job? And then tell me why and who followed you to your last job. And it was surprising how many managers were kind of jumping between these, kind of FANG companies or Airbnb, DoorDash, Uber, GitHub, like all this stuff, right? And like, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I just kind of move every couple of years. I'm trying to get promoted and chase the grand. And like, I felt like this was a hotter company. And it's like, wait, but like, did you not build relationships and people that loved working for you so much that when you went to a new company and made a great decision, they followed you? And it was like blowed my mind. And you're like, you would meet people and they're like, well, no, nobody's worked for me. And like, to me, that was just a big yellow flag of like, you haven't built a tribe. Where mine was like, man, we had built multiple companies and I'm still working with the same business partner who was my office mate 26 years ago. Now we're still building companies together like 26 years later. That is more rare than it should be in a company that's or in an area and where it's so interconnected in such a small world. But yeah, so I'll leave it that in terms of like just build a great team.
You know what's funny though is we just came back full circle on the principles that we started up with, which was build things the right way over a long period of time, right? Bezos did it and Warren Buffett did it. I worked for Geico. It was a Warren Buffett company. He would come to Geico once a year. Got to shake the dude's hand. Secretly funny as hell. Just hilarious human being. He would give a speech every year. But the point is, it's about deep-seated relationships and building the right way over a long period of time and tossing out the noise, right? And so I think It is very complex. I will agree with you. You could argue in many different ways, but I actually think it's not as complex as everybody once again should make it be, which is get the right people around you and have a long-term vision. And I think my frustration, where my original comment came from, is the long-term vision. You can't. It's hard because a lot of times, like in certain situations, the long-term vision might have been there from the top, but when you're down further from the top, it just seems like complete chaos. I don't know how to solve that, because you could still have a really long-term vision in a stable company. But like, how do you make the ethos of the company feel like that? And that's a tough problem to solve. That's a really tough problem to solve, especially when you're talking about 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 employees.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Maybe the answer is don't get to 70,000 employees. I don't know.
No, it isn't. I think it's funny. I spent one of my newsletters 2 weeks ago was on this topic of like, how do you build vision and culture? And a lot of it's like, you have to set something that's aspirational enough that you can align people to it, but also believable enough that people will actually wake up every day and want to work towards it.
Right.
And then you need to like highlight and correct behavior that's not working on that goal, right? Or one of those. And as you get bigger, you'll have a few goals. But like when we got acquired by Microsoft, like Satya's thing was simple: just have a growth mindset. And it wasn't even what to go do; it was just how to do it. He was like, "Don't come at me and tell me you're doing it the way we've done it for 25 years because you've been at Microsoft since they invented Clippy." He was like, "No, like, let's figure out the new way to do it. How are other companies doing it? How are our competitors doing it? How are startups doing it? Even though we're Microsoft with, more than 100,000 full-time people and more than 100,000 contractors, like 250,000 people worked for Microsoft at the time." And he was like, you have to break that elasticity and have this, sort of new way of doing things. And that was a culture that, really radicalized arguably some of the early days of Microsoft. And because when he took over, it was so stuck in their ways.
I love it, man. Talk to me about this, and then I promise we'll get to Web3. Do you have a hard stop?
I can go a few minutes over.
Okay. So we got 15 minutes, and we'll talk a little about Web3. We're going to have to do this again, but I can't not ask this question. There's a fine balance between getting the best out of people and empathy, right? Because sometimes you can push people and not look like you have any empathy, but at the time, it might be the best thing that you can do for them. What is your concept on kind of that balance in leadership with empathy and driving people to get the best out of them? I think it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'll start with this. Like when people do, like when I'm at big companies, you always do these like 360 reviews, you have review processes and stuff. You get a lot of like feedback sessions. And my reviews were always very polarizing. You would have people that absolutely hated me because I pushed so hard and I was relentless. And then there's other people that were like, kind of die on the sword, kind of like loved following and loved being part of the team. And when I reflect back why that was such a common thread, I think I have a really low tolerance for people that don't want to work hard, don't want to put in the work, don't want to like go to that get behind sort of a mission and really be excited about it. And I'm to a fault hard on people where they're not aligned to like, kind of go like, let's have a sense of urgency. Let's go. Because I like, even as we're at bigger companies, I feel this internal drive that like, we're blessed to be here. It's lucky, whatever you want to call it, the sense of the world that we're able to work in these incredible jobs in this incredible time and be part of technology and work at these incredible companies and have like all of the discounted food or free food, depending on which Silicon Valley company you work for.
Yeah.
And not to be showing up like we're putting in the work and driving hard. And so, so to me, don't be disrespectful. But there's also like the tough love thing is kind of true. Like, I mean, if you ever do a hard workout with a trainer or you're on a sports team and, 10 people are pulling their weight and the 11th one's not, like, and those 10 people are hard on the 11th person, it's like ship up or ship out, man. And like, There is a bit of a like, and I think part of it comes from growing up and like my dad was, had this military kind of view of like, man, like, yes, people will die. right? If you make mistakes on the battlefield or you make a mistake in the airplane, like you won't be able to land the plane. And so there was this sense of like, I would describe it as there was a sense of urgency for things that typically didn't seem like they needed it, but that created an atmosphere where people who were up to the challenge and wanted to would do their best work. Because it created this like inspiring way that like, man, you look around and if you're rowing in a boat hard and you see everybody next to you sweating and rowing their hardest, you're just not going to stop. And like, that that's the mission. And then when you see people slacking off, and that's why I always said, like, the worst thing you can do as a manager is not let poor performers go. It may not be their fault. It may be because you're the wrong manager. It may be because the right time. Like there's a whole bunch of reasons why people aren't a good fit for a company. But if you don't let those people go, you're taking time away from the high performers. You're taking effort away from people that are sitting there sweating in the gym and seeing people just taking pictures and flexing. And you're like, man, we need to get to work here. And like we all want, and you don't want to have to say it. You want that implicit, like we're all in it. And so to me, the balance can be there, but I also feel that for the best and highest performing teams, they want to be challenged and they want to run hard. And people love winning, man. And the way you win is you create a resonance of like, doing the right thing over time, being consistent and having a really an unrelenting sense of urgency.
Yeah. And so follow up to this, the people want to win, but if you're not winning on something you care about, is all meaning loss? Or can you win with people you care about, but like the thing you're working on, maybe you're not as passionate about? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, again, sports analogies are great. Like there's people that have won Super Bowls, national championships. They don't all like each other.
Yeah.
So I don't think to be on a winning team, I don't think you have to be best friends with people on the winning team. I think you can have a different
I'm actually
opinion.
saying the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm saying you are on a good winning team.
Yeah.
But you're working for a tech company, but you actually don't really like tech. Can you as a leader and a team chase something because you're just surrounded by good people and the end goal is not maybe a passion of yours? Mac is the opposite of what you're saying.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I think like,
so.
Are there people that have won being in the right place at the right time? Absolutely. Graduating Stanford and interviewing for Google when they needed software engineers, know, or just coming out of like the Silicon Valley over the last 10 years and being in tech, even if you weren't writing code, but you were a hard worker and you got a job at the right company at the right time. I think like, were you actually passionate about it? I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of people. We had an employee once, and they were an amazing coder, but then they just weren't performing. And we're like, what's going on? And they were like, I want to be an artist. I was like, go do that. Like don't, you're putting yourself in purgatory by showing up here and breaking into jail by trying to write code. That's not the kind of art you want to do. You don't want to be a code artist. You want to be like, go write, build pictures and paint. And so I do think there is a sense that, so I think, can those people be successful? Can there be people that are not passionate about it that make money and join these companies? Yes. Is that the best decision for them? Probably not, right? I think like you're going to be a lot happier doing something that you at least enjoy. Like, again, I always ask this question in interviews: what gets you excited for Mondays and not for Fridays, right? What is it that you want to wake up and run towards and not, close your laptop on Friday and run away from? And it's that sort of, and that could be what you do at work, how you work, the type of teams. Like some people are like, hey, I want to be on this kind of team. I want to be in this kind of culture. I want to be doing this kind of like, I want the work to be, providing this thing, this service to the community or to, I want to work with this kind of customers. Right. And so I think you have to find, like, I'm a capitalist. Like I enjoy like building businesses that produce, capital. I think there's a lot of people that are like, well, that's not the right goal. We should be, having social impact. Are we having like carbon footprint? Like there's other climate goals. And I believe in a lot of that stuff too. But I think like some people want that exclusively. Like they only want to work for something that's changing the world in a certain way. And I think then for them, they're not going to be happy working for big tech and doing something, even if they're quote unquote winning.
Yeah, dude. Amazing. Listen, I can't do us justice by trying to rush through Web3. I'm going to ask you politely that maybe you can come back for another half hour to 45 minutes and we'll do a Web3 segment if you would be open to that.
Let's
Because
do
it's
it. Let's do
been
it.
an incredible conversation. We've had so many learnings and insights. I love your angles. So what I want to do here is I will ask you one last question. I will give you my final thoughts and we'll call it a day for now. But I knew we probably would need a part two, but we definitely need a part two now because we did not even get to like Web3 AI, nor did we even do your Web2 career justice. But it was an amazing conversation. So, last question, man. You have now experienced the Mikey G Web3 podcast compared to the stuff that you see in the space or even other podcasts that you've been on. Honest, open feedback on how today went for you.
It was good, man. I think like to me the biggest difference is you really take your time thinking through some of this origin story from like a different angle. And I enjoyed some of the questions around not just the lessons, but sort of the negatives. And I think allowing the conversation to quite frankly drift off course a few times and sort of go, where we sort of decided to go and how it sort of vibed, I think felt pretty natural. So yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I'm going for. As long as I accomplish the goal that you just felt, my job has been done here. And the fact that we get to come back and talk about Web3 and AI, I cannot wait to do that. Final thoughts. I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation. I think, again, it wasn't rocket science. Like the stuff we talk about is not rocket science, but your takes were really interesting. The fact that you come off as a glass half full, which I know you are, very excitable, but then like opened up about being anxious. Like that was super cool. That is going to help somebody in the future. I love because I am more of a empathy, feely, touchy guy. But the way that you talk about how you think you can effectively build companies, but at the same time, align so much on what I believe in as well, too, when it comes to leadership and goal making and all of these different things. And the college insight was fantastic too. Like you've had all these reflections and then are still coming back to the fact that it is about mind, body, and soul. It is about balance. It is about like if you could do it over again, maybe not burn candles at both ends. And having these realizations were really cool and fun to reflect on. And I just thank you more than anything else for your time, man. You just gave me an hour and 22 minutes. That's worth thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. And that's not lost on me, man. It's not lost on me. And I hope you truly believe like I do. This is really the beginning of a friendship. And thank you just so much for taking the time. And I cannot wait to talk again, man. Really appreciate
it. Awesome, man. Let's do it. Thanks for having me, Mikey. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. And with that being said, Mikey and Kevin are out.